All right, welcome back, everybody. I am super excited. I get to interview as he doesn't necessarily know it, but he is definitely a huge mentor of mine, someone that I've followed for a long time, someone that I've gotten great inspiration from, someone who I see, in the back of my head whenever I have to think about big ideas and big changes and kind of big moves in my life. This guy's kind of voice and face comes to mind a lot, and that is Philip McKernan. Philip, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm very humbled by what you just said.
So Philip is an inspirational speaker. He's the author of Rich on Paper, Poor on Life, and he is a filmmaker of an absolutely awesome documentary that I recently watched over the weekend called Give and Grow, and I'm gonna make sure you guys have some links to get the film, because it is an absolute game changer, and I really want to delve deep into some of the ideas that you give, I guess, that you kind of propose in the film. But first, I want to know a little bit about you. I know one of the things that is really interesting when we get to meet the people that are our mentors, and when we go to big events and we see people on stage and we see these kind of like larger than life figures and these like larger than our brain ideas, that we tend to sometimes get starstruck. We tend to like think that somehow they're just different than us. And when we get to know their story a little bit, we realize that we actually have a lot more in common than we don't. And I love to someone that I love listening to, actually, that was on the podcast on your documentary, James Altucher. He always asked people about people's origin stories. The comic book series, the origin series, where they asked, or they delved into the stories of superheroes, and they kind of looked at what made the superhero, and looked at their history. And so I love asking that same question, because I don't know, I love to know. So, Philip, how did you get to be the superhero that you are today?
Well, I don't mean to put a hole in the question, but I don't consider myself a superhero at all. I feel that I'm just very human. I've got my weaknesses, I've got my vulnerabilities, and while I appreciate certain people see me in that light, I'm not sure it's a very healthy thing. I mean, one of my clients to this day still is in a little bit of shock, because the very first day I met him, I could see he had me on a pedestal. And he looked up to me, and not in that very healthy, respectful way. It was in this kind of almost idolizing way. And the very first time we fully engaged in a client relationship, if you like, one of the things I did was strip down myself from that pedestal, because, and there's a very distinct reason for that, because if I believe that I'm something I'm not, I mean, and I'll come back to your question, I'm not ignoring it, but we're standing shoulder to shoulder here. And what happens is, as the person, the superhero, is pushed up into society, it's pushed up by the people, because we have this incessant need to find superheroes. We literally went off the streets years ago into the kitchens of restaurants and took chefs out and made them celebrities. That's our human desperate need to find celebrities. And when it's not the chefs, then it'll be the plumbers. Then when it's not the plumbers, it'll be back to priests. And then when it's not priests, it'll be somebody else. So we have this incessant need in society to look at people above ourselves, to elevate them to a point that we are not. And to me, that is hugely detrimental on so many levels. If I stay grounded, and that's for other people to decide, I believe I do stay humble and grounded to the best of my ability. I do have an ego like all of us. It's for two reasons. One is I don't allow my clients to push me onto a pedestal, and secondly is I don't believe the work is me. I think it's coming through me, as corny and as cliche as that might sound to some. But when you get pushed onto a pedestal, which you allow and society does, when you get to the top and you look left and right, it's extraordinarily lonely. Is this going to be on video or just audio, by the way? A question.
Video as well, yeah.
Video as well, great. So people can see my little hands here doing a pyramid. And you're standing in that pyramid, you look left and right, and you're very, very incredibly lonely. And then you start to believe you have all the answers. And that's the fall from grace. And the fall from grace here is bumping into somebody. The fall from grace here is a long way down. So as a speaker, as a teacher, as a mentor, as a coach, whatever you want to call me, it is a fear I have, is losing myself in the work and beginning to believe that I know more than I actually do, and beginning to think that I'm different to everybody else. So, but very back to your question is, I think the reason I do what I do, and if I have a gift, and I'm told I do, I think the gift came through the pain that I personally experienced myself. I think I experienced a lot of discomfort, a lot of pain. I experienced a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of inadequacy. And I think that's what equips me to be able to identify that in other people and see the roadblocks that they have simply because I've lived through so many of them myself personally.
And how did you make that switch?
I didn't. I never did. I mean, it's still, and again, you know, I'm not just trying to pick, but a switch implies that it's gone. You just flick the switch, hey, gone. Suddenly I see the light, and maybe that's not what you're implying, but to me it's a dial. And there's still days, and thankfully they're more rare, but there's days I wake up and go, what am I doing? Who am I to teach this? I question myself at the core, and I don't like those days. None of us do, but to pretend that those days don't exist would be so dishonest. It would be so dishonoring to myself, right? Me personally, forget about everybody else, and the people I serve. The thing that clients say to me, or quite a few of them say to me, is you show us your human side as well. And that gives us tremendous inspiration and hope, because you're not trying to be perfect and you're not pretending to be, because I never will be. Yeah. So to me, the dial is continuing to turn. When you flick a switch, a lot of people go, oh yeah, I dealt with that. And they've never dealt with it fully in that sense of it's gone. I just have brought it with me, and my awareness is stronger around it, and I think it equips me more, I suppose, more effectively as a result.
And I think that also is what makes you a more powerful leader as well. Is that because number one, you're not ashamed of that. You're very open with the fact that that you feel like you have a long ways to go, and that you carry around all of these things with you, but I think that makes it. Not only is it attractive to other people, but I think other people can identify it, because I think that's something that goes on in all of our heads as well. I'll tell you, like just the other night, we were out seeing U2 play here in Vancouver, and it was just a phenomenal show. And the best part of the show for me, which like will probably no one will even remember, was the last words that Bono said, the singer, when he was out on stage. They did this amazing set. They went through the whole Joshua Tree album, which was like, you know, one of the most classic albums of all time in rock and roll. And they finished their entire concert with a brand new song that they haven't even released yet. I can't remember the name of it right now. The Things That Give You Away, or something like that. This is The Little Things That Give You Away. And they finished the song, and Bono says, he kind of gets on the mic again. He's like, I hope that was okay. And to me, wow. I was like, here is this, like, people, like, I remember as a teenager going to see them in Winnipeg. I freaked the fuck out when I got to meet Bono, shake his hand, and I thought like he was some god. Like, he was so different than I was. And the more that I've delved into coaching and into, me being of service to other people, I start to see how we all carry around these little insecurities, these little like, do you see me? All of these little things. And I saw a moment like of pure vulnerability, of pure like authenticity of a guy who's, 57 years old now, who has more money than he can, lifetimes can spend. And he asked a question because he still wanted to know, like, hey, do you still see me? Was that okay? Do I matter? Was that okay? And I thought that was just so brilliant. Like, and most people probably didn't even hear him say that. But to me, that was that was the moment of the show. It was like, you just made yourself totally human, totally accessible to everybody, because we all feel that. I thought that was so cool. And I think that's also what's really powerful about the work that you do as well, is that not only you have these big ideas that are sometimes, for some people, hard to swallow, in that maybe it's a reality that we've never considered. It's looking at ourselves in a totally different light, but it's knowing, I guess, and seeing you go through those same things as well gives us the strength to be able to do it as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I do hear similar feedback in that regard. And I think, my work has been interesting too. For example, I did a retreat recently with couples, which is not a big part of my work, but it was something we did. And, one of the guys was there I've gotten to know quite well, but he told me, and he kind of threw his wife under the bus and said, when he first heard about me, he watched a video, sent it to his wife watched the video, And he said, what do you think? And she said, yeah, it was great, but don't ever put me in a room with that guy. Don't ever put me in a room with that guy. And there's this, people have historically been very, very scared of me and very, they see me as very intense and whatever. And then people often say, oh, he makes me cry because, he goes for certain places. And what I realize is they're not scared of me, and I never make people cry. They're scared of actually uncovering themselves. And what people know is when they get to know me is the work is very real. And my approach is very real. And I think probably because I was so unreal, I was so fake, I was so unauthentic for so much of my life. And I think I wore so many masks. I was trying to fit into society. I was trying to do anything and everything to please everybody but myself. And I spent 38 years trying to be anybody but Philip McKernan. And I think I know what that feels like to live in that exhausted place, that purely exhaustive place where you dishonor yourself every day by going to work you just don't want to do, by living in a city you don't want to live in, by staying in a relationship you don't want to be in, and having a relationship with yourself that's so shallow and empty. And I know what that pain is like. So I'm fucked if I'm going to spend the rest of my life having surface conversations with people who don't want to go deeper. And therefore my business is smaller. Our work is not as big as maybe some other well-known speakers. But that's okay, because I feel that I'm here to help people go to those places that they need to go to, that they don't often want to go to, so they can really understand who they are, really uncover their gift, and really bring those two things into alignment and do meaningful work on this earth. That's why I'm here.
Right. Do you remember a moment where that started to change for you, where you went from, being so scared and kind of being stuck in that way to, wearing those masks to seeing something different?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple moments throughout my life. I'll just give you one that kind of comes up as you speak. I mean, I think for me, I kind of deep down knew what I wanted to do. And I think that's the case for most people, if not everybody. And I kept putting the barriers in front of myself. And I kept telling myself these incredible stories. One story that I told myself, which some people may relate to, is that, well, I need to be financially set. And then when I'm financially set, then I'll have the freedom to go and do what I want to do. And a lot of people actually accuse me. Says, "Oh, well, it's easy for you. You made all your money, and then you decided to do coaching and speaking and whatever." I said, "No. Are you telling me my story? Or are you asking me my story?" And that's not true. I literally sat in the kitchen in Ireland years ago after our first year in Alberta, and then we moved to Vancouver. And I remember my wife looking at me and says, "Forget about it. We're not going back to Canada." And I said, "Why?" She says, "It's not working. We've got $200 in the bank account." So we had some real estate, and because the Irish economy fell apart, we lost that. And every dollar we had, we poured into a business that we didn't really want, that we knew. It was like a lady I worked with recently, and she was telling herself this incredible story, how she was completely devastated by this asshole guy who ripped her apart and ripped her heart open and devastated and destroyed her. And everyone around this small group setting were going, "Oh my God, love you," and helping her and putting their arms around her and poor you. And I get the compassion, but she was like living on this. This was like oxygen. This story was a part of her identity. And I turned around and said, "I'm sorry, I think you're too smart and way too aware and way too intuitive not to have seen some red flags." She said, "Philip, absolutely none." And I went deeper again. I said, "I just don't believe you." And with anger vibrating out of her body, she put her head down and lifted her head up and said, "I knew the day I met him, and I knew the day walking down the aisle he wasn't the right guy." We do things despite the fact that we deep down we know. And I knew setting up that business, pouring all this money into it, not making revenue for 2 years, I knew deep down it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't the business that I was meant to be in. I knew it wasn't going to stir me. And I had various reasons. One is, well, I don't know what else I would do, which is a great one. Another one was, well, even if I did do speaking and coaching, I'm not qualified. I don't have any qualifications. I don't have any letters after my name. I'm dyslexic. I can't read and write. I don't even have any degree of any sort, and so on and so forth. And I listed all these reasons and excuses and rationales. And then I sold myself this extraordinary story on the other side. But I'll have all this money, and then I'll go back and I'll be able to do it bigger and better, and then I'll be so free. And it was just this perfect mismatch of this storm of gold, silver, and complete bullshit. And that's what kept me from. So I'd love to tell you, I was so aware, and I woke up very early in life, and I jumped in. I said, "This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life," and I know it. Not true.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the stories that people tell themselves, that we tell ourselves, is that because let's say if we are starting a little bit later in life, that oh well, I kind of missed the boat. I kind of missed my opportunity. So never mind.
Yeah,
Which I don't do.
good. So you missed the boats, and great, no problem, fantastic. Well, then just move on. And I say that in that very sarcastic asshole tone because don't keep going around telling yourself that story and telling everybody else that story. So, for example, I had somebody recently who I believe is a gift. I mean, they're gifted, and I argue say that about everybody, but their gift is just like it's just so palpable. You can just feel it, and they have a genuine match that with a genuine desire to impact. And they go, well, it's late and everything else. And I said, well, who are you going to work with? And he said, well, I was going to work with kids and there's. And I said, you know what, you're right, fuck them. He said, excuse me? I said, you're right, fuck them. Who cares about those little kids that you could have saved and help them with confidence? Fuck the people that you could have helped through the lens of your own individual pain. Forget about them. You're right. Absolutely forget about them. Let's make sure that you're protected and you're safe and that you don't have to put yourself out there, and make sure that your story is perfect and make sure that your rationale keeps you from pushing yourself out and making a difference. And he was so mad with me. He was so mad. And eventually he cooled down. He said, do you think I'm being selfish? And I said, 100%. It's all about you. It's all about why you shouldn't do it and how you're not good enough and everything else. I said, I'm sitting with all the people you can impact. I'm even sitting with the 3 people you can impact. And the thing is, he's caught in his own story like I was for years. And when I stepped out of my way, and I still get in my way all the time, but when I stepped out of my way and went, this is not even about you, McKernan. You're just this little tiny cog, this little vessel that happens to have maybe a gift, maybe insight, whatever it is, right? It's not about you. And that was pivotal for me. And it wasn't a moment, I can't remember a day, but it was a period of time. And that has been absolutely instrumental. So when I get a kick into the teeth or somebody criticizes me or someone knocks my work, typically people have never done it, ironically, it affects me. I go down, I get affected, I get my confidence gets a shit, you kick ass, whatever. And then I come out of it and say, it's not about me. And it helps me to bounce back.
Right. So how do you, here's what I think some people wrestle with. And I've definitely wrestled this before. When getting to the idea of, okay, well, it's not about me. So serving others, giving of myself, I think there's a line that can be crossed when we make it so much about other people because of the underlying stories that, well, I'm not enough, I don't matter, so then I'll just make everybody else kind of the center of attention because, and I've seen it, like pathological servants, I call them. Yep. It's like they are killing, like they're martyrs to their own life. And it's easy for others to see. But when it's happening to you, and I definitely have been in that place where I felt like I didn't matter at all, but I was going to use whatever powers that I did have to shine onto others because I was so afraid of who I was. I didn't want the light shone on me. I just wanted to like deflect it. So how do you, like, how do we draw that line and kind of how do we step back in serving and giving and saying, like, being able to say it's not about me, but still being kind of rooted in a power of ourselves?
I think you can only do it in a healthy way when you actually have gotten to a place where you have a healthy self-respect, you have a degree of love for yourself, and then you make that move. And it's a brilliant question, and it's a very valid one. The martyrs, I've seen them all over the place. I was one for many years. I thought I was going to save the world to the detriment of my own personal health, my mental health, my emotional space, and everything else. And I couldn't. I was bouncing up against walls. Why isn't this sticking? Why can't I make an impact? And I forgot one piece of the puzzle, and that was looking after myself and actually doing the work, the deeper dive on myself to understand who I am at my core, what is my gift, and then aligning those to the work that I'm here to do. I was just going out with a machine gun and going shooting everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. My mother's a classic martyr. My mother's a wonderful woman, but she has given everything away, every part of who she is away, and there's almost nothing left. And now her physical body is deteriorating, and she just does not know how to put herself first. So there's a great distinction there, and just saying it's not about you doesn't mean be selfless and put everybody else first. Making it not about you in a healthy way is putting yourself first, but not allowing the work to the results or the blocks to be all about you as an individual. In other words, have a focal point, but it comes through you. But to me, I am number one. And I don't mean I'm number one in the world, but I'm number one to some extent in my own world. And on days I forget that. And sometimes months later, I realized that shit, I haven't done that. I haven't done the self-care. I don't have that self-respect. So the most important work I ever did was a deep dive in my personal story, which I harp on about to everybody. And a lot of people go, yeah, great. Anyway, give us the 5-step system to doing what you do or whatever. How many people out there in this world know who they are? And I mean really know who they are at the core. Not, I live in Vancouver, I was born in Ottawa, I have 4 kids, I play soccer, and I love Hawaii. That's not your story. That's the surface stuff. What's beyond that? Like what's below that? And then below that again. And have you really reconciled and fallen in love or respect all of your story, all the ugly chapters of your story as well as the beauty? And to me, that has been the single most pivotal work that I've ever done as a human being. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't ready. I was no good to serve anybody until I did that work.
Right. So how would you have people get started on that? Like what would be well, never mind the 5-step system. What would be the first step?
I personally, I think you can journal it and all that, but I really don't believe you go deep enough. I think what you do is you protect yourself. So you'll ask yourself questions, searching questions that keep you at the surface to some extent, because you don't want to go down and feel. And a lot of people don't see the value in going back and turning over poor memories or bad memories or volatile times or times where you got hurt. What's the point of that? The point of it is that when you go back and understand who you are, what you'll identify is you start to move into the present. So I do this with clients. I go back into the past, then we look at the present, and then we look at the bridge, which is the patterns. And what you'll find is the past has created the present, and the present is creating the future. In other words, who you were in your past, your relationship to money, your relationship to relationships, your confidence, your self-esteem, all those things are playing out your future, no matter whether you like it or not. And when you go back, you can start to fundamentally understand those things. I would honestly, absolutely implore every single person to find some type of environment, whether it's a coach, whether it's a retreat, something to go and to do that work with somebody who's qualified or in a position to do that. If that's not available to you financially or otherwise, I would do a deep dive in a journaling capacity. I would go back into your past and ask very simple, very fundamental questions. Who am I? Go back and literally write out parts of your story, write out the pieces that were painful and challenge it. Like, be curious, not judgmental. What was it about that experience that bothered me? Why was I hurt? What really was it? Was I just pissed off at my dad, or did it represent something deeper? Was it abandonment? Was it, not being good enough and whatever? It's absolutely enriching to go back and understand your story.
Yeah. So on that topic of curiosity, I think, when we look at, something that I've heard you say a lot, through the different videos and things that I've read about you or from you and things like that is, the idea of our story, that, that we serve at our highest level because of our story, because of our past, because of our present, creating that future. And, when we start to look at our past and look at our story, I think there's the story itself. There's like the facts of the story, like this is what happened. But then there's the story about the story. Yes. And, for most people, those are the same thing. It's not like there's what happened and then there's how I feel and what I made it mean. It's all the same thing. So when someone looks back and say, oh, why did this happen, or what happened, or, whatever it was, there's no disassociation from like, I wonder why. Like, it was just this kind of raw emotion and just being stuck in the story. Yeah,
people intellectualize their story. So when they go back, they typically live. One of the biggest problems in the world today, biggest human issues in the world today, is we're living in our heads. So there's so many human beings living in their heads, and people will argue all day long, well, that's the most powerful part of our body and our brains are incredible and whatever. Good luck with that one, because I'm telling you right now, if you're living in your head 70, 80, 90% of the time, you're not living, you're not feeling, you're not connecting, you don't connect with emotion, you don't allow other people in emotionally, you don't connect with your children, with your life, with your wife, with your husband to the extent that you could, you don't trust your intuition, and you live in your head because you've been taught how to do it in societal terms and being promoted to do it. And secondly is it's also safe. It offers a type of control, an illusion of control. It's not really control. So you don't have to feel. So we've become this society in many respects that just don't want to feel or don't know how to feel. And when you go back and understand your story, people go, yeah, okay, I did the story thing, Philip. Yeah, I journaled for 6 weeks and I did the story thing. And they have this intellectual understanding. It's like reading a great book that has depth and richness in it. And you go, yeah, read the book. I go, great, so what have you done with it? Well, no, it was great, it was a life changer. Okay, great, but what have you done with it? Well, I mean, I understand the theory now. I go, great, but what have you actually done? Where the magic happens and it goes from the head into the intuition, into the gut, into the soul, or I call mindset versus say soul set as a term I've dubbed. And I'll give you an example of this. So I can give you multiple examples. I can give you business examples. I can give you commercial examples. I can give you money examples. I'm just going to give you a very simple human example with my wife, and I'll throw her under the bus because she's not here. And she years ago, we were chatting about moving. And she recited this story to me. She said, years ago, I always remember the devastation of moving from Glasgow back to Ireland and my parents leaving my pram behind, which is basically a kid's pushchair. So it was her doll's pushchair, basically. And that was her intellectual memory. But I could feel the emotion behind it. And I said, well, what do you mean? Then she started crying and she felt so embarrassed and so stupid and so inadequate. And she was so judgmental. She goes, oh my God, I'm so silly. It was like the pram, the pushchair was left behind the day before. And I just went beyond it. And I said, so what did it mean to you? She says, I've never thought about it before. I said, well, let's think about it now. And she goes, well, I suppose we just didn't have much. We didn't have much money. That was my pride and joy. That was the only thing I owned, my doll and the pushchair. And it was like, I couldn't believe my parents forgot it. And I said, well, what did that represent to you at that age? And she basically said that I did not matter, that I did not matter as a child. And when you grew up in the house of 7 children, as she did, mattering, being seen, being heard is massively important for all of us. It's hard to get oxygen in front of 7 kids. And then to cap it all off, and it's not that they're bad people, but they left her pride and joy behind. So this is a grown woman at almost 40 years old who's sitting in the living room with me, bawling, crying like a child because she had never joined the dots. And not being enough has haunted her all of her life, and she was completely unaware of it. So then what she did was, then she compromised who she was as a woman. She compromised who she was as an entrepreneur. She compromised who she was as a mother in order to seek that, as opposed to being strong and healthy in her own skin. That's just one little insight. Now, she could have had an intellectual understanding for 20 years, another 50 years. But it was transcending and dropping into that emotional space, joining the dots, and allowing herself to revisit the emotion and the connection. And I've had that with so many successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are struggling. And when they connect, they come out the other side and go, oh my God, no wonder I keep sabotaging. No wonder I keep jumping from one thing to the next. No wonder I keep telling myself that I don't know what's next. No wonder I keep getting so close to success and I hit the destruct button. No wonder I can't hold down a relationship. Everything we are today is contained within our past. And the saddest thing for a lot of people is, and there's an unawareness around this, is that they walk this earth never, ever fully understanding who they are. And yet they obsess about trying to find out about Da Vinci and Steve Jobs and understanding every nuance of these successful entrepreneurs that have gone before them. What about just understanding who you are intellectually and emotionally? I'm telling you, it is gold dust. Mm-hmm. It's gold in terms of the awareness it can give you.
So how do you go from having an understanding, mental understanding, to really having that the feeling? Because it's like how do you, like you said, like with your wife, like how does she connect those dots, like from here to here?
Well, like, in that case, it was the questions I asked her, and it was the space that we created. So it's the question. So yeah, because basically when I'm sitting here is I'm reluctant to throw something on the table because I don't want to come across this self-promoting guy. I'm trying to give value without promoting my work. But I do this thing called Brave Soul every year. It's a retreat. It's an immersive retreat. And what we do is we bring, say, 20 entrepreneurs or 20 people away, and we do this. And we go back into their past, and then we go into their present, whatever. What allows the people to go deeper is kind of, I suppose, ultimately two or three elements in this. Number one is we bring them on this journey of their past and we direct them. So we ask them very specific questions and we basically help them navigate into their story and go deeper beyond the surface. The second thing is we then create an environment where they have nature and they have space. They go hiking to these 5,000-year-old roads. We have beautiful music. We have storytellers come in, and it allows them to kind of open up emotionally. So it allows the work that we're doing land internally a little bit deeper, and then we process it. For those who are happy to share, they can share, and then I go deeper. So okay, what did that mean? What was the feeling like? What was anxiety? Okay, what was beyond anxiety? Why did you feel anxious? Well, I don't know. And well, let's go there. And it's just that processing piece. It's having somebody help you navigate through that. I did the same myself. And I'd never have gotten to the level of understanding and awareness on my own. I absolutely believe that. So it's questions. And it's also people going, I don't believe you. It's somebody challenging you very gently and very compassionately going, I hear the story. I hear you telling yourself this. I know you hold on to that as that's the reality, but what if it's not true? So for example, I often have a lot of people going, I had an amazing childhood. I had a guy literally the other day, who's deeply stuck in his life right now. And I said, let's just go back very quickly. I'm just curious. And he said, great childhood and everything else. And I said, well, yeah, great. So great childhood. He goes, yeah. I said, well, so you keep saying, you've used great 3 times. And I said, you seem to be trying to sell that to me. And he goes, no, it's amazing. I said, oh, no, it's amazing. So great. I said, I've never met anybody that has an amazing, perfect childhood, which you're trying to imply. He goes, well, there was some tough times. And I said, like what? And he goes, well, we were very poor. I said, well, that must have been hard. And he goes, yeah. And this is a guy who just went into dentistry and had just spent 4 years in dentistry and hates it. And I said, why'd you go into dentistry? He goes, well, because I love dent. And I said, why did you go into dentistry? He said, because I have 2 clients as a personal trainer who are dentists. I saw the cars they drove. I saw the money they had. And I wanted that because I know what it's like to be poor. Do you see where the awareness comes from? And I said, you went in for inauthentic reasons. You went in for money, which is not a bad thing, but it was purely money. It wasn't money and joy. It wasn't money and fulfillment. And he just literally, and it's very simple. This is not rocket science. And he's going, oh my God, I've never joined those dots. I never realized that I'm actually running from poverty. I'm running away from it, as opposed to stopping and saying, hey, I don't want to be poor, but what do I actually want in this world? So many of us are running from what we don't want, and we're not stopping and saying, hey, but what do I want? And the energy is so different. So that's the type of awareness that can be taken from our past if we create the space in order to go there.
Yeah, I think that's such a key thing. You said, like, creating the space.
Yes.
We live in a world where, people don't even go to the bathroom anymore without this thing. Like we can't even spend, a minute by ourselves with our own thoughts. That we just fill the space with nothingness, and
totally.
It's distraction rather than connection. And I think this thing can be a form of connection if we use it properly. It can be a tool to connection, but we just.
But it's just that curiosity. Like I just spent 4 days in Tofino on my own, creating space, and it took me a couple of days to land, like emotionally. Because, you're still in that very much more heady space. You're in that thing, you're checking your phone or whatever. And I just landed down. And then just to be curious, let's just say you're struggling in life. What a lot of people do is, I'm just stuck. I'm stuck again. And this is going on for like months. And do you hear the tonality, the harshness, the way we speak about each other? Like if I could hit a record button and record how some of my clients speak about themselves and play it back to them, assuming that they kind of get out of that space, they start to get some clarity, they start to build some self-compassion. And I could play it back. I said, do you hear? They'd be going, who's that asshole? Who's he speaking to? I recognize the voice, but who's that guy? And we speak about ourselves and to ourselves with such disdain sometimes. And it's the very thing that prevents us from actually uncovering more of that clarity. What if you just looked at stuckness and you looked at misalignment and you looked on unhappiness as a possibility, as an opportunity? And goes, yeah, okay, I hate my job, but you know what? I know. And I'm one of the few that has the courage to stop and not just recognize it, but put my hand up and admit it. Yeah, I'm bloody curious to what's next. But we don't do that. We go, fucking hate my job. Yeah, and we either rationalize why we should stay in it, or we go things like, yeah, but I don't know what's next. I'd love to open my own business, but I don't know what that looks like. And we keep telling ourselves that story. Well, that's what's going to happen. That's the truth. But what about being curious? What if I did know? What if I knew exactly what I wanted, but I just don't want to see it? and be curious, be invitational. And it's such a compassionate, creative way of approaching a problem as opposed to just beating the shit out of yourself.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the like you keep talking about like the question behind the question, and kind of the mask that we put on our challenges and our problems, that oftentimes it's not actually the problem we present with is actually not the problem, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the common, let's say for the people you've worked with, like what are some of the problems that they would commonly present with that actually isn't the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a couple of humdingers and simple ones. Is that, I'd love to open my own business. I just don't know what that looks like. I'd love to leave this job, but just don't know what's next. Don't know what my passion is. Don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And it's, I'm telling you right now, that's a bullshit lie they're telling themselves. And I know people get really annoyed when I say this, because then they make it sound like I'm judging them and I'm being condescending. And I'm telling you, I've seen this so many times. And we tell ourselves that. So the question behind the question could be a better question. So what is the confusion or the lack of certainty? What's the convenience? What's the upside of that? What's the upside of not finding your passion? They go, what do you mean upside? It's driven me mad over the last 10 years. I'm going insane. You're telling me there's an upside? Just stop being so angry for a second. Stop being so judgmental. Stop being so attacking. Stop being so defensive. And just stop for a moment and ask yourself this question. What's the upside of never finding my passion? What is the upside? What's the convenience?
Well, the answer that comes to me is that if I found my passion, if I truly found my passion and fucked it up or failed at it, that would mean that the deepest part of my soul was like a failure, that I failed at life.
It's okay to fail doing stuff that you don't want to do. Because ultimately you can always say, well, it didn't work. I mean, I was never meant to be in finance. I was never meant to be an entrepreneur. I was never meant to be whatever. But what if you uncovered what you're truly here to do and you ran the risk of failing? And that's the problem. We frame it as failing. But what if we found what we're here to do and we ran the risk of being happy and fully fulfilled? And I absolutely believe to my core, when you uncover what it is you're here to do, destined to do, meant to do, whatever you want to call it, excuse me, as long as you've done the work and you're really in alignment with it, it's not just some intellectual understanding of something, I don't think you can fail. I don't think it's possible. I think the world will find a way to make it work for you and with you. It just can't fail. And to me, there's an upside of having this lack of clarity. People use a lack of money, for example, as an excuse. Okay, great, Philip, great. Okay, I get it. Okay, so there is this thing I want to do, but I just don't have the financial wherewithal. I mean, I've got a condo downtown in Vancouver. It's costing me, it's $4,000 a month, and I've got my car and I've got all these expenses. And go, oh, okay, so sorry. So now what we're saying is you've got to have your lifestyle, which is totally intact, cannot be negotiated with, and now you want to find your passion on top of that and monetize. And they go, well, yeah, okay, so really then the bank balance, the mortgage is more important than your message, and people are, it's really interesting. So we put money as an excuse, and it's never money. If anyone ever sits in front of any human being ever on earth and says the reason is time and the reason is money, it's never time and it's never money. Go beyond that. It is never time and it is never money. Right. It is never time and it is never money. And I have proved this time and time and time and time and time again. And I'm going to give you one example if people are still lingering on this. So what the fuck is he saying? He's saying, so I'm going insane because I don't have clarity. He's saying I already have it. Oh my God, this guy's annoying. I want to rip his face off. And why is he even on this podcast? This guy is like so annoying right now. In fact, they may have even switched off right now. I don't know. But if they're still with us, I'm going to give you a quick example of somebody who sat in front of me, literally the other day. I mean, the guy, I won't even go back. I can give you so many examples, and said, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm going to give you the dentist guy. He was in dentistry for 4 years. And he goes, but Philip, I'm staying in there because I don't know what else I do. And I said, I just don't believe you. And I'm telling you, it was no more than 7, 8, 10 minutes later, he basically just throws this thing out. And I said, you're some shit. And he goes, excuse me? I said, it's crystal clear. And he goes, yeah, but I don't know how to execute it. And I go, no, now you're going to the detail. What you said to me is you had no idea what you would do, and yet you've just outlined a vision for something that you feel so aligned to doing. I said, how dare you get on the phone and lie to yourself and lie to me like this? I said, you know what you want to do. The detail is that. He goes, yeah, but even if I did set up this business, I don't have the money to. And I said, well, there's a million investors out there looking to invest in stuff that they're passionate about. Every excuse under the sun. And the main reason is his self-worth he's never dealt with. He doesn't like who he is. And that's not a cool conversation, the entrepreneurial word. What do you mean I don't like who I am? I don't like my self-worth. Yeah, that's not cool. Tell me it's a strategic problem, but don't tell me it's a self-worth problem. Most entrepreneurs have moved into the world, they've got busy, and they've never stopped and identified and addressed something that has haunted them from a young kid, and that is their personal self-worth. And that will haunt them as life moves through, because it's a lack of deserving the success. It's not deserving to be happy. It's not deserving a relationship. And we give ourselves what we feel we deserve. So if my self-worth is here, I will give myself everything to this point. I will dream about here, but this is my threshold.
Right.
This is my threshold. So if this elevates, everything moves with it. Think about a man or a woman in a dysfunctional relationship where they're being disrespected and they continue to stay. They're not staying for any other reason other than the core is that that's what they feel they deserve. If this shifts, they look at the same relation and go, no, I'm not going to be treated like this. Go fuck yourself. No way am I going to sit here and allow you to treat me like this. So shift your self-worth, everything else changes.
Right. How would, I think one of the, and I know this was definitely for me, the concept that you talk about like moving from the idea of, let's say something that I do career-wise, entrepreneurship, things like that, something that, that we move into that we're good at, that we have talent in, versus something that we have kind of that, like an inner, like that we gain so much more fulfillment. I know I recently read a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and he talks about your zone of genius. And he also talks about how, people will get stuck in what he calls a zone of excellence, is where things that we're really good at, things that we're told we're good at, but they really don't fulfill us at a deep level. And that the biggest challenge is, that most people get stuck in that place where, well, I'm doing it because I'm really good at it. And hey, well, I'm in this business. Hey, I'm making really good money. I must be really good at this. So I should stay here.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a funny one. There's a few things that come up for me there. There's a guy, I'm writing a book at the moment, and because of my dyslexia, it's challenging. So I've got a guy called Tucker Max who's basically interviewing me on a very aggressive basis, extracting this book out of me and so on and so forth. And
I love that guy. I love Tucker.
Yeah, a lot of people judge him, but actually, I've gotten to really like him, and I would consider ourselves, good friends. And he created this great concept called Book in a Box. But anyway, Tucker came to me and we were chatting, and I'm writing a book about one last talk, which is a concept that I feel very passionate about, and it's not about me and my ego; it's about everybody else and their story. So I feel very strong about it. And he said, I'd love to do the speaker retreat where you take people away and help them extract their 15-minute one last talk. And I said, Tucker, it's like you've tasted my cake that I baked. You've just gone, oh my God, this cake is extraordinary. I want to come to your kitchen and watch you bake it. And you're assuming at some point I'm going to go to this little press, I'm going to open it up. There's going to be a combination lock. This little safe will open up and steam will come out. And I'll take out this test tube of this secret ingredients that has been passed down through the 15 generations of the McKernan household. And I just dollop a little bit in, I put it away. You go, oh, that's what I'm looking for. And I go, there's nothing to it. I said, I simply sit there and listen to the talks and intuitively navigate myself and hopefully the speaker through where they could go deeper and wider and so on and so forth. And he goes, yeah, you're describing something that you do so naturally and so intuitively that you don't see value in it. So when you have, say, an accountant who's very, very good with numbers and they're very talented, I'm just using an accountant. I always seem to pick on accountants, probably because my wife's an accountant. They can rationalize and justify that has value in this earth. But let's just say they have this wonderful ability and this deep desire, which is untapped. They don't open up, they don't share this, but they just seem to be able to meet people and help them navigate through challenges in their own lives. In other words, they're gifted at helping people become unstuck. And I say to them, well, have you ever thought about coaching? I'm just using this as an example, or speaking, and oh, no, about accounting. No, but just helping people personally. Oh God, no, God, no, no, just, no. I mean, I don't have any. I've never done a coaching program. I've never done a coach the coach. I've never done a certification. I mean, by the way, and it's just simple stuff. I mean, to me, it's very obvious. Do you see how we talk down the gift? I said, no, it's not obvious. It's obvious to you.
Right.
It's not obvious. It's obvious to you. And what we do is we do a number of things. But I've studied accounting. I can't surely turn my back and waste all that time. So we frame it as a negative, and also we just play down our stories. So to me, the ultimate possibility or outcome here is the accountant might go through life telling themselves they're fine, and telling themselves a great story that it's okay being an accountant, even though I don't fully get fulfilled. But what gets missed in that conversation is the gift. And the gift is the place that I'm not saying they should jump out and be a full-time coach, but what if they were to honor it and take on one client every month, or just mentor a few people? In other words, just lean in and honor it and experiment with that. What you'll find is they'll get a joy, a fulfillment, an element of meaning that there is no paycheck in the world that can replace. And there are so many people in that position today, and my heart goes out to them, not in a condescending, feeling sorry sense, but in a very strong request and ask is, honestly, is this what you're meant to do? And deep down, do you feel when the lights are turned off that there's something that you haven't quite got to? There's something that you haven't unearthed within yourself. There's something that lies dormant within you. It may scare you. You may tell yourself it's unclear, but I'm telling you right now, if you have the courage to lean into that conversation, two things are going to happen. Number one is you'll begin to unearth what I call your gift, not your talent. One, it will impact the world in a positive way. That's my experience. Every time I've helped somebody uncover this, it's always, not slightly, not sometimes, always impacted the world. Every time. 1, 2, 10, or a million people. The second thing is the fulfillment and pride that you will get in your own soul is beyond anything you will ever experience from a daily paycheck, in any team building situation, any promotion, anything you get. It is beyond anything you can imagine. And if you got hit by a bus having uncovered that, and you had one or two last breaths, my experience personally and professionally is you will die with absolutely zero regret. You will have a fulfillment in your heart, and you will have left a legacy that is so much more meaningful than what you've historically been doing.
Right. Yeah. It seems like the kind of the transition, the way I'm seeing it while you're talking, is that, going from a talent to the gift, is that recognizing what your gift is moving from having the understanding of like a gift is something that I have, or we see that someone, oh, you have the gift. When we recognize that it is the gift, is actually not something that we have, but something that we give.
Yes. It's something that is dormant within us. I believe it's contained deeply within our own personal narrative. So this is somebody who, okay, great, but what is the gift? Well, I'm not here to tell you exactly what your gift is, but what I'm here to ask you to consider and strongly suggest is that your gift is contained within your story, and your gift typically is contained within the deepest, darkest part of your life, in the pain. And that's why people don't want to go back and experience it. One of the things that people say about my style in a room, in a retreat, or whatever it happens to be, is I've got this ability to be ruthlessly, strong with somebody and deeply compassionate all at the same time. And I think I don't think I could do that. It's not some skill that someone taught me how to do. I do that because I go back over my personal story, and I can connect from an empathetic standpoint with the pain that people are going through. So I can connect with it. And then I believe, and this is where I am going to be self-serving, I do believe I have the courage to challenge people. And a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people say, a lot of entrepreneurs go, oh yeah, I surround myself with people who challenge me all the time. Well, that's typically bullshit, because when an entrepreneur kicks back, or a leader kicks back, is that person willing to come back at them again? And not just argue, but really go, listen, John, I know you're telling you that story, but I'm telling you, you're blind right now. And I do that because I know what it's like to live most of my life doing something that I don't want to do. And I don't want that for anybody else on this earth. And as long as I'm here and I can help as many people as possible make that shift, that's what I'm here to do.
Right. Fantastic. And is that why I want to get into your film now, because that was I will be very honest in that there were many moments in that film where what I consider ugly cried. Like it was like it struck a chord in me at such a deep place, and not only me, but the other people, my friends, and people that I know that have watched the film as well. Like it went really deep, but in such a way that it was like I didn't know it was coming. All of a sudden, like there's this beautiful this beautiful landscape of the mountains in India, and all of a sudden I find myself like almost in a fetal position crying. I was just moved so much. And so what prompted you to make this film? So the film is called Give and Grow. And yeah, what prompted you to make the film?
Wow, it's kind of hard to keep it together after what you just shared. I mean, I suppose actually probably one of the most pivotal days in my entire existence. It was a day in an orphanage in Sri Lanka, and that was a very pivotal day because I learned something about myself, that we didn't get a chance to go to a store and buy toys for the kids. We didn't get a chance to go to the stationery shop and buy pencils and pens. We were literally brought to an orphanage, and it was so awkward. It's one of the most awkward situations in my life because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have language, and I had to just let go. And what I realized was the kids didn't want gifts. Or maybe they wanted gifts, but they didn't need the gifts. And what they desperately yearned was somebody that would look into their eyes, hold their hands, attempt to dance with them because I can't dance, play with them, engage with them, and see them for the human being that they are. And to let them know, even for a couple of hours that day, or well, 7 or 8 hours, whatever, that actually, you know what? They matter. That someone actually sees them for who they are and that they're worth spending time with. And I'd love to tell you, I mean, I should really make up this amazing story that I walked out of there and I had this vision and the film was part of it and everything else. And it'd be a lie. I walked out there and I got caught in my own shit again. Well, but I'm not good enough. Who am I to make an impact? But something stirred, and it shifted maybe 2%. The thing that was missing, that I believe is missing in a lot of volunteer experiences for me, was no one sat with me and said, what did that mean to you? So, for example, with respect, and I'm asking the question not for you to answer now, thank you for your honesty, is why did the film affect you so deeply? And to be deeply curious about that and go beyond, the question and go the question behind the question. And what you'll discover is something very rich about yourself. And that wasn't there in Sri Lanka. And it really helped me realize that actually, you know what, McKernan, you don't need letters after your name. You don't need a bank balance to make a difference in the world. That, you know what, you can make an impact by just simply being who you are. And that is one of the greatest life lessons I've ever learned. I was very slow getting there, I will admit. And I decided that if it made that much of an impact in my life, what if I created a retreat that brought people not just to volunteer with street kids and orphans, which I believe are some of the most vulnerable people in the world, but then we went into the mountains and we trekked for 3 days, and each day everyone just gets one question to ponder, one question for the entire day. And they just layer back and layer back and layer back. And then at the very end, we create space and go do a deep dive on what happened. And I experimented with it, and I was not ready for the power of that experience. And I don't mean it was me, it was the experience. And then we did 4 or 5 of those retreats over the last, we do one a year. And then I said, okay, what if we brought a crew with us and try to capture the essence of the journey for what people go through? And that was what created the Give and Grow film. And what emerged through that process was the difference between a talent and a gift. And that was kind of organic. I'd love to tell you that was part of the plan, but that was very organic. And that became a central theme in the film, like challenging the talent and the gift, and asking people to consider that they are separate. They can be connected, but they're not always connected.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the really cool things for me, like the big point of distinction when we talk about the talent versus the gift, is that realizing that, a talent is something that I do, but a gift is the kind of thing that I am. To recognize that, actually it was one of the lines that I still remember from the film. And it was actually from one of your interviews, James Altucher, who I love listening to. He said something to the effect of like, imagine, when you're walking down the street and everybody that's coming past you, that's walking the other way, imagine them, kind of look at them as if they were your daughter. And I know he kind of mentioned it probably because he has two daughters, and it might have kind of struck deep with me because I have a daughter. She's about to turn 1 in a week from now. But I remember thinking that, like, yeah, like if I, for my own daughter, like I would want, I want the absolute best. I want her to have the most amazing experience in life. And I would just hope that when people see her in the street, that they see her, man, I'm kind of losing it just saying this. I just want people to see her for the amazing gift that she is. Like she doesn't have to do anything. Like she has done nothing for us other than like, she doesn't make sandwiches or like clean herself or, she doesn't do stuff, but just her being in our life has been just the greatest source of joy and fulfillment. And like, it's just, you talk about like the soul set, like that, my soul set radically transformed the moment that I saw my daughter, and recognizing that she doesn't ever have to do anything to be worthy of the gifts of the world, that she herself is the gift. And I could see a little bit more that, wow, like if she's that, my parents probably thought that about me. And so I might be more of a gift in and of myself than just the things that I do. And I think that was something that really kind of stirred in me at a deeper level when watching your film, was just recognizing that, wow, like you were saying, like, yeah, like I do matter.
Yeah.
Just because I exist.
I love that. If there's one thing I could add, and not necessarily for you personally, but any parents listening or any people that are going to be parents in the future, is the one thing that I would love to kind of almost expand upon that a little bit is that, we want the best for our children. And there's so many parents out there that just want the absolute best education. They want the best location. They want the best everything. And I can tell you to some extent with a little bit of authority, in the sense that not just because I was a child myself, but what a lot of people don't know about me is I work with a lot of young people. So I've spoken to thousands of young people. And I work with, say a teenager who's struggling, of a client of mine, and they could be sitting here in my own home having a chat with me and whatever. And I can tell you one thing absolutely categorically, is that they may not articulate it this way, but what kids need, what they want, maybe they want the new iPhone, but what they need is they need their dad and they need their mum to be the best version of themselves. And, one of the greatest examples of this is I always remember a young man coming up to me in Vancouver at the end of one last talk. And I said, and he just watched 8 adults give a very vulnerable talk about a part of their life, not about global warming or the indigenous population or the future of technology or any ideas. It's all about their own personal narrative. In other words, to go deep and to inspire in a different way. And I said, what's your number one takeaway? And he said, my number one takeaway is it's great to know that adults have problems too. And right. His parents are the typical parents. And I say this very non-judgmental, because I do it myself to some extent, is that it's like cry behind closed doors, don't argue in front of the kids, all the stuff, protecting the kids from everything else. And what he desperately needs is he needs his dad to put himself first. He needs his mum to put himself first. Because in 20 years from now, his parents will be sitting in front of him and going, hey, do this, live your dream, go for it, make sure you're using your gift, don't settle in work you don't want to do. But he'll be looking at his own parents going, he may not be consciously rolling his eyes, but internally be going, yeah, but Dad, you didn't do that. You didn't put yourself first. And one of the biggest sledgehammers I ever hit my wife with, when I was having a chat with her about taking time for herself. And I said, just take time, go and get a massage, go for a walk, just take space. And she was going, yeah, but I'm busy and everything else. And I said, and I just took out the greatest sledgehammer of all. And it wasn't like intentional, just because it was organic. And I said, can I just ask you a question? Just curious. When Maggie's your age, our little girl, and she's your age, what would you want her to do? And my wife looked at me and teared up and says, that's unfair. And I said, no, it's not. I said, what would you want her to do? And she says, I hope she puts a value on herself, and I hope she takes time for her, and I hope she creates space for herself. And I said, what's the best way of helping her do that? And my wife looked at me and says, by seeing me do it myself. So if you're a mother or you're a father and you're sitting there and you're on the treadmill and you're working your ass off and you're telling yourself you're doing it for your kids, maybe that's what you think your kids want. But maybe your kids need their dad and they need their mother to put themselves first, to live a passionate life, to go out there and take risks, to never fucking settle in this world. And by seeing and witnessing that, you grow up in this inspirational family where those lectures don't need to happen in 20 years. That person grows up with a strength in their heart that perhaps wouldn't ordinarily be there.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And I think about that. That just brings me back to my childhood as well. And thinking about the most powerful times that I remember as a child seeing my parents was when they did that, when they kind of stepped into the fullness of who they were. That it wasn't necessarily something that they did, but it was just the people, like the presence that they offered me, and the words of encouragement, and because it came from such a deep place within them. It just wasn't something that they did, but it was somebody that they were. Yeah,
so cool.
Very, very cool. So I want to finish with this. Well, I guess I want to get some of you talk about the last talk, the last thought, what your last thought is. But you also, I don't know if this is, it's appropriate or not, but you made an offer to me right before we started about your film. And you made it like one of the things I love about you is that, well, number one, you're very humble and modest. And I think that's very admirable. But I also want to know, I want people to know that, the gift of who you are. And I mean, you made us an amazingly generous gift to see your film. And we'll put a link to that. But yeah, here's what I would recommend. Anybody who wants to watch the film, go buy the film. It's an absolutely crazy amazing. It cost me $20 US, and it changed my life. So return on investment there, not even a question. But if you're not there, if you absolutely want to see the film, then Philip has made it available to our listeners to be able to watch for free. So thank you so much, Philip. That is absolutely amazing.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
And I'm not sure if I was supposed to mention that or not, but
that's okay.
I want to because because I think that's just an amazing gift, and I think that's I don't want it to come across like that was my doing. I had nothing to do with that. I'm creating the space here for this conversation. But yes, we'll have links of all of that on their show notes page. And it's just I think one of the biggest takeaways from our time together right now for me is the idea of create the space. And in that space, I think like life is a vacuum. That we'll find a way to fill the space. But if we create the space and have the intention of asking the question, like, what do I really want? And being okay and, like you said, curious with what that answer is, and coming from a place of curiosity as opposed to judgment and shame and guilt and of whatnot. So to create the space, and so I would implore you, I would really highly recommend it. Create the space, the 57 minutes I think it is for your film, and sit down in a somewhere where you're not distracted, where you can just really create the space for your mind and your soul to take in the gift that is this film. Give and grow. So yeah, again, we'll have the link. So what would be your final thought for our listeners today?
Well, you mentioned one last talk there. If you were maybe something for them to consider, a little exercise. I'll give two little exercises that I feel are very, very simple and very important. One is if you were to sit down and write out, if you were given 15 minutes to give your one last talk in front of one person or 10 million people, it doesn't matter. What would you speak about? What would you leave the earth with? What's the last message? Would it be a lecture? Would it be something that lies outside of yourself about global warming? But if you had to tell a part of your story in 15 minutes, what would it be? It's an exercise I've given to people. And it really allows us to focus the mind and open the heart. Like, what would you deliver? And you may go even a step further and say, who would you deliver it to? And you can do a kind of more diluted version of this. If you were to write one last letter, which is something I'd encourage everyone to actually do, if you were to write one last letter, what would you say and who would you write it to? You can write it to anybody. You can even write it to yourself if you wish. One last letter. It's the last letter you're ever going to write before you leave this earth. What would you write and who would you write it to? And don't underestimate the power of these exercises. These aren't just emotional exercises. These are not exercises to try and piss you off, to stir emotion, whatever. And yet they're very designed to do that. But what it'll do is it'll bring you to a place of understanding of who you are. Because every time I've done these exercises with people, what it's done is it's got them to a place to go, I didn't know that was in me. I didn't know that's what I wanted to talk about or what I wanted to say. So again, it gives you a really understanding of who we are. The second exercise is to identify the 5 happiest days of your life, to write down the 5 happiest days of your life in no particular order. Don't force. If you only get 3, that's fine. Don't do 6 or 10 or 15, just 5. And there could have been a moment in that day. It may not have been 7 hours of euphoria, laughing or whatever. It could have been just a moment, a hug, the minute you saw your child the first time, whatever it is. And then write the 5 happiest days and then go back and hierarchy them, like number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then go into each one of those and ask one simple question. Why? Oh, well, it's because my daughter was born. No. Why? And go deeper, go deeper and go deeper and go deeper. And what you'll find is you'll find subtleties around yourself that you will not believe. The reason Give and Grow, the film, exists today, and this is something that most people don't know, the reason that Give and Grow exists, yes, partly because I was in Sri Lanka, yes, partly because I did a retreat around it, because I sat down and created the 5 happiest days of my life. And my number 1 day was in Ireland on my stag bucks party, where I ended up, was the inspiration for the retreat I run there. And my second happiest day was the day in Sri Lanka, and I had no idea it had that effect on me. My wife's was the same. Then we got together and said, why? And I said, because I was able to impact people without writing a check and so on. And then that was the inspiration for the Give and Grow film. So life leaves signposts everywhere. We just don't stop to really take them in because we're too busy looking for the next signpost and the next one and the next one. And yet the ones that have gone before us will give us such insight into who we are as a person, what our gifts are, and what we're here to do on this earth.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
So for everybody listening, I imagine, hopefully, I hope my intention is that you guys are as speechless as I am right now. I'm so happy that you took the time, Philip, to come on and join us and share your ideas and share of yourself and share your story. And I hope that whoever you are listening right now, that you know how much you matter to me, how much you matter to the people around you, and how much you matter to the world. And that the greatest gift that you can give the world is by recognizing the gift that lies maybe dormant within you and making that come alive so that you can give of yourself and give that gift. So thank you for everybody. Let's create this revolution every single day. Have an awesome day. We'll see you next time.